there's something I think that's really, really important. And it does link into career management, and that is looking after ourselves. I think that COVID times, like Bukola said, they are uncertain. It's not happened to any of us. People who've been around for much longer than us. It is even worse than the World War II. Quite amazing.
Yeah.
Certainly, the economy has reacted in that way. The hit to the economy has been really, really harsh. It's likely to continue to deepen. But what this does is it impacts our very lives. It impacts how we feel as people. It impacts our confidence. It impacts our hopes, our prospects, and our careers. It impacts our family lives, to be honest with you. And therefore, I think that in these times where most of us, apart from those on the front line, as well as key workers, are working from home, I think we should take the time out to make sure we do something valuable with that time. And I think that in that context, I'm not necessarily saying about something work-related, neither am I necessarily talking about academics, but I'm talking about to yourself as a person. I think we should all be thinking about how we can spend that time helpfully. Now that could be, and I'll give an example with myself, when I'm at work, I do try to exercise. I don't do as much as I'd love to, but in this period, you've got all the different websites available, your Wix, etc. They're all available. It means you can spend time working on yourself. Now that is really important. I think the other thing I was going to focus on is the use of these platforms like Zoom. You'll find that a lot of us feel isolated. A lot of us are not engaging with lots of other people because a lot of us have our relationships being based on work. Now, when you don't have that, I think we should use Zoom not just for work purposes, but also engaging with our friends. Now, women are much better at doing that, at engaging with friends, than men. Men often go out and meet up when they go out. But I really encourage people to use Zoom facilities, etc., just to recreate a sort of positive environment, hang out with your friends. And I think that's positive. I think that will actually have a positive impact on your work. Now, if I could move on to the work side, I think the work side is really, really tricky because we're in the position where many of us are frightened for our jobs. When I speak to people, both at work as well as outside work, the overriding message, even if it's subtle, is, oh gosh, am I going to have my job in 3 months' time? We all hear about what's happened with the airline industry. We can see the thousands, tens of thousands of jobs going. We can see exactly the same thing in the hotel industry. We can see what's happening in the manufacturing industry. It's just really a difficult time, the 5% decline in GDP. But let's bring this back to ourselves. What does it mean? I think one of the positive things you can do vis-a-vis your employer is being positive. What we do in KPMG is we try to have, as I said, I have very, very regular sessions with my team using Teams. We use Teams, not Zoom. And this is quite important for me because it helps me to get to understand where people are, and some of my team have suffered COVID, understand what their concerns are, and try to address them. Now, what's the overriding concern coming through? Overriding concern coming through is, firstly, have we got enough work? Is something going to happen to us? But the other thing that people don't actually think about as much is you think about me, but you need to think about the broader group of people in your business, in your team. And what does that mean? That means that when you think about businesses trying to make sure the business is successful and they protect jobs for everyone, don't think about protecting just your job. Think about protecting everybody's job. And that means that we need to be positive when the business comes up with ideas. For certain businesses, it's already really, really harsh. And the options are get rid of people or go down to a 4-day week. Now, we might feel that we're the most important people, but you know what? Sometimes we all have to make a bit of a sacrifice. But if it's a sacrifice, it means it's better for all of us. I think we need to be prepared to make that sacrifice. So I think that's quite an important thing, not just for today, but also shows what substance you have got as a person. And therefore your business engages with you in that light, knowing how you've dealt with difficult times. I think that is important also, and I think I've said this before, is that we all need to recognize what is it that we bring to the party. We all bring something different. We need to know what that is. We need to know what value that is. We need to make sure we can bring that value. And I'll just give a number of examples. But at the same time, we know that we can bring that value. We may need to adapt. We may need to do jobs different from what we normally do. Now, one could say that is taking a step back in your career, but it's not necessarily so. Because if you are in a company that you enjoy working with and you intend to stay there in the medium term, then trust me, it is important to gain a range of different skills. And in these difficult times, we have to be prepared to be redeployed if that is necessary. So if, in my case, I'm a tax partner, if I had to do something different because there wasn't enough work for me, I certainly would be prepared to do that. And I certainly would encourage my team to do that if that was necessary. Now, hopefully we don't get to the stage where we need to do that, but I think you must be prepared to do stuff like that, redeployments. And redeployments could be positive because it's showing your commitment to the firm, positive because you're helping your firm make the money to make sure you remain in a job, positive because you're gaining new skills. And let's come back to our day-to-day work. When we think about our day-to-day work, what are we doing? Again, I always emphasize excellence. It's really, really important. If you were normally exceedingly busy and now you're less busy, I think you should focus on how do you keep on raising your game during that period. One of my mentees, I had a chat with him on Thursday. So I have these sort of 6 weekly chats with different types of mentees. And he's a young guy, very intelligent, very talented, works in a big consulting firm. And the chat really was, how can he progress? And he was doing a lot of really good, detailed work. But what he wasn't doing was engaging with people. And therefore, he didn't have the support. And we agreed a plan for him. And that plan included working with 4 individuals we identified as important to his career. And working with him, not just in terms of pestering the person, but agreeing a plan of action whereby you engage with, I'm going to use the top lady, Charlotte, engaging with Charlotte, understanding what projects she's got, understanding how you can add value to that, and making sure that you get into the inner circle, because we very often are in a situation where we're in the outer circle. Outer circle is not always very good, because when you are in a position where you want to progress quickly, inner circle is probably a better place to be. But also in COVID times, it's better to be inside than in the outer circle. Anyway, I had a chat with him on Thursday, like I said, and unfortunately he had been furloughed. And we then chatted about what he had done up until the stage where he had been furloughed. And he had reached out, he had engaged, which was very positive. And he had taken on that importance of networking. And whilst he's still on furlough, he is engaging with people back in the business. Now, a couple of things come out of that. One, if you've got, in his instance, 200 people being furloughed, you can see where the strength of relationships comes in. You have 200 people furloughed, why would he be the one to be brought back when new projects come online? It's either you have shown how good you are, you've made some form of impact, you have created some sort of relationships. It will put you higher up in the list in terms of who comes back on board. And that proactivity, I think, is really, really important. But something else he did, which I was quite impressed by, was he's gone out and he's a tech guy, and he's doing the AWS certificate, so the Amazon Web Services certificate. So what he's trying to do is put himself in a position where, in his period of inactivity, so to speak, of no work, he's spending time developing himself. And in this instance, it's a formal qualification he's doing. I think that's positive. But we don't all have to do formal qualifications. You can just get better at what you do using the internal resources you've got. But I think the learning point from him really is think about what you're doing. Think about how you can make yourself more valuable. How can you enhance your value proposition? I think that's really important because we're going to come out of this without a shadow of doubt. We will come out of this. It may take a few more months. The government is committed to getting us out. Business community is committed to getting us out. Resources are being thrown at this. And what we need to do is we need to put ourselves in a position where when you come out at the other end, you're in demand. In demand by a company, not just because you're a good guy, but because you've got the skills. You've built on those skills. So I think that is important. But you've also continued your networking. You know, networking is a really important thing. When I mean networking, I don't mean just networking across the board. I mean networking in your business and understanding who the key players are. How do I make sure that they notice me in a positive way? What can I do to demonstrate my skill sets? How can I show my eagerness to do more, to support the business more? Now, the reality is that I have a slight concern, if I'm honest with everyone. And that concern is that when, well, let me see if I can put it in a more positive way. Over the past few years, we have seen a lot of emphasis on trying to recruit and progress Black people into more senior roles and into leadership roles. In these sort of times, we don't want us to be disproportionately negatively impacted. We must do everything we can to avoid being in that position. And we're talking about this as leadership in various businesses to say that just cannot be the right thing to be done. Because there's always a risk that when you are going to lose 5,000 people, you lose 30-40% of your Black population. We are trying, and a number of businesses, a number of charities are trying to make sure they shine a spotlight on that. But we also have a responsibility ourselves to try and avoid that being the case. And we avoid that being the case by demonstrating what value we bring. Not just that we are great, we've got a PhD or MBA. MBA, PhD, these things are great things, and degrees are great things. But actually, what do you think really matters? What really matters is, what value are you bringing to me? So let's get out of this, not just talking about our degrees. You know, we Black people, we know how to study. You know, we have degrees, we have MBAs. You know, we're very good at what we do. But let's just make sure that the powers that be, and you need to know who the powers that be are in your organization. You must understand who are the people who make these decisions. That doesn't mean you need to go right to the board level. That's not necessarily the case. The board level can simply say, we're going to lose 5,000 people across the business. And it's going to be cascaded down to the different teams to make decisions. So you need to know, in your case, who are the key stakeholders. You need to be able to prove. And it's a subtle thing. I'm not asking you to go in on Tuesday or Monday and try and prove a case, but you're constantly trying to show your value, but subtly, not obviously. But again, let's go back to it. I do think that we are in a strong place. I certainly think before COVID, I was really happy to see a lot of businesses engaging, a lot of business trying to progress Black people. And as I said to Bukola before, that I think the young, our children coming through are going to be in an amazing place. They get their education, do very well. They'll come through, and I am hoping that they will get jobs much more quickly than some of us got jobs in those days. But for us, as of today, we want to make sure we keep on climbing the ladder. Thank you very much, Bukola, for an opportunity to speak to the team. Happy to take questions.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Richard. I have two questions. So while I ask my questions, can everyone else please type their questions into the chat box? So the first one I have is actually not a question, it's more like an accusation. You said you have 6 weekly meetings with your mentees. I can't recall getting an invite, you know, and I think I'm your chief mentee, you know, I've sort of self-appointed. So we can take this one offline. The second one is very, very important when you've talked about when these kind of things happen in terms of people want to lose, an organization is not doing so great and they need to lose staff. And that's, we risk sort of eroding the progress we've made on the ethnicity and the diversity agenda. And so, like, what are the kind of the practical things? And I loved what you said around you have to demonstrate your value, you have to know who the people that the influential people are. But so, like, for people going back into work on a Monday morning or Tuesday morning, what are some of the things that they can start doing, considering the fact that we are all at home and we're just meeting by Zoom and Teams and all of that kind of stuff? How can people start to demonstrate their value and start to almost ingrain themselves into the fabric of the organization, which is the thing you really need to do to sort of avoid the cuts for as long as possible?
I think that is absolutely right. So for every individual on the call, it'll be slightly different, clearly. But I'll illustrate it with my perspective. So in my world of consultancy, we thrive on billable hours. We bill work, you cover the money, you do work, and you get more people involved in jobs. So in my world, what you need to do is you need to be clear, depending on what level you are in the business. For junior person, the most important thing is showing that you're doing your billable hours. Now, if you're a Tesco driver delivering goods to people's homes, home delivery, you need to show the number of jobs you're doing, the sort of feedback that you're getting. The second thing that you need to do is to show you're doing it well. Whatever you're doing, how can you demonstrate you're doing it well? This is where feedback becomes really, really important. So it's not just about you thinking you're great, it's about you sitting down with whoever you're doing the work with, ensuring they give you clear, honest feedback. In normal times, I always say, I'm really keen to get feedback to help improve me. And I still believe that, even in these times. Now, the reality is it's better for you to get feedback that says, yes, you're great at these 5 things, but you need to work on these 2 things. And with regards to 5 things, make noise about it, We know how to make noise, yeah? So you make noise about those 5 things. But for those 2 things, develop an action plan and demonstrate you've developed an action plan. So what do I mean here? If you say you're technically not good enough, you try and show that you are trying to develop the technical knowledge. You try and demonstrate that you're now working with X who has amazing technical knowledge to try and not weigh the person down, but more you can put in weekly or fortnightly meetings to talk through technical issues, whilst you take the overriding responsibility to build your technical knowledge. You have check-ins every fortnight with somebody who's considered to be very good at what they do, and you learn from that, and you agree a program of activity. The more senior you are, the more the expectation in a business world is that you've achieved the technical ability, and therefore what we're looking for is proactivity in the business. Proactivity in the business means driving initiatives forward. Proactivity in the business means ensuring that deadlines are met, the job is done properly. In my world, it means going out to clients, even if it means using Zoom, because you're not going to go out to clients directly. Using Zoom, etc., means to try and engage with clients and still build a portfolio despite COVID times. What we don't want is for you to just suddenly collapse and think, oh gosh, the world is at an end. So I need you to be positive, very, very positive in whatever you do.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Richard. We have another question. So this person says, what if you've been out of work? How do you network and how do you continue to show value?
It's a very good question. It's a hard one. Very, very good question. Very, very hard. I don't think there's the silver bullet there. But if somebody has been out of work, I think that what my mentee said about training must be relevant, because if you could demonstrate that let's say you've been out of work for a year, for instance, you've been out of work for a year and you do some training whether it is with formal or informal certification, I think that must put you in a better position than you otherwise would be. I think that when you think about training, the training is not just for technical, but also for the exposing you to different contacts in your industry. I think the third thing is that, unfortunately, it is quite difficult getting back into the business world, but you do what we have always done, which is you persevere, you have to be resilient, and you will get there. But what you can't do is stop applying. You need to persevere. You need to have the strength of mind. You absolutely need to be confident and positive, because when you are called for a job interview, if you come across as having lost confidence, it doesn't put you in a good place. So have somebody close to you. It could be a parent, relative, friend, coach, whatever, who can pump you up before interviews, pump you right up. It's really important. I was just watching Last Dance last night, and it's quite impressive when you see how people like Michael Jordan have been able to become so impressive. And there's one thing that overrides everything, which is the passion to try and be better. So I think that we just have to keep on at it, basically. Keep on at it, but be confident, and don't go into downward spiral. That's why I started off the session, rather than talking about career, talking about ourselves. Do all of those things that can keep you in touch with people and keep your morale up. If your morale is not high, it is very hard to get a job. Yeah. And it's a vicious circle, but you know.
Great, thanks, Richard. There's a feedback here where someone said that was really on point. He's a business owner and he joined this chat room to get some perspective on what an employee should be doing. And you've been great and on point. So that's the positive feedback. Someone else said, thanks for the great talk. Here's this question. What are your views about the prospects of going out on your own and starting a business in this current climate?
You know what? I think there are loads of new opportunities presenting themselves. Quite interestingly, I think that whenever you have difficult situations like this, it creates business opportunities. I'm going to say what I think is positive, but what I think we must have to make sure that we achieve that value. So I think that just chatting with people, so many different things are coming through. The masks that we see, you can see that there's a huge opportunity there. Of course, you got the masks that you see in the UK, but you can also see some of these funky masks coming up, Ankara masks, etc. Somebody's making some money out of them. You know, people are going to set this up, and people will make a lot of money out of it, and you will have millions and millions of people who will want to buy that. And we like being trendy, etc. So there's some value in that sort of stuff. But to be honest with you, there's value in setting up businesses, provided you're very clear that there is demand for it. So whilst I think there's some good opportunities, the example I just gave, I just gave it because I think it's something that I find really interesting when I've seen stuff on social media about the sort of Ankara type mask. But I think clearly the person asking the question probably wasn't thinking about that. If you're thinking about any area, what I think at this stage is, if you've got cash, yes, it's worth investing. Yes, it's worth starting up a business, but you need to do your research. You need somebody to challenge you on your business model. The challenge is really important because it's very easy for each of us to think that we're absolutely amazing at whatever that opportunity is, but we may be able to just enhance it, even if it's that little 20-30% bit, by speaking to others and engaging. But there's the other side of things also, which is if you haven't got experience of setting up a business, do a lot of work understanding what it entails. Some businesses have regulatory issues. So, if you're going into restaurant business, there's loads of health and safety issues around. You need to be really clear on that because, obviously if you fall down on that, there's a big issue there. And clearly you wouldn't be opening restaurants right now, given COVID. If you're going into consultancy, some people set up small businesses doing the small business version of what many of the large companies do. Great opportunities there. Think about how you can specialize and be focused on particular areas to prove how good you are in that particular area. That's great. But also, in our community, we have a lot of talented people in the tech space. I think that tech is going to come up with so much new stuff. And I think that there's a group, what is it called? Impact X. Impact X has raised funds. I'm not sure that you know them, Bukola, but Impact X.
Ursula Burns is part of them, right? The former CEO of Xerox.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. So they've raised up I think it's $100 million fund, and it is particularly targeted at the Black community. And, whether it's a hairdresser, whether it is barbers, whether it is beauty, these are huge industries for us. Whether it is tech, it doesn't really matter what it is, but they're prepared to fund businesses that are setting up. You've also got people like Foundervine that are working with smaller businesses also. So I think it's a good time to set up a business, but I'd be very, very cautious, very cautious. I do like the bit about setting up your business plan. I do like the bit about the bank reviewing it and challenging it. And if they challenge it and they don't think it's any good, on the assumption that they're giving you an objective view as opposed to saying they didn't know about that particular market. So obviously, if you have a hairdresser and they have the foggiest idea about the Black community and how much we do in the hairdressing world, then that's not necessarily good feedback. But if they give constructive feedback, I think I would certainly take that on board. I'll certainly get somebody to challenge my business plan. What you don't want to do is lose money in these difficult times. Not just because losing money is a bad thing, but also because that money could be better used by your family.
Someone else is asking, what tips do you have for people looking to move from technical roles to managerial ones in large organizations?
Pardon me, I missed that.
So what tips do you have for people looking to move from technical roles to managerial roles in large organizations? Did you get that?
Yes, I did. I think that if you're in a technical role, well, first of all, I challenge that. There's an assumption that management is always the best place to be. Leadership is always the best place to be. I don't necessarily believe that is always the case. You have to look at your circumstances and think where you are. If you're a niche specialist, you will always have a job. If you're a niche specialist, you're very likely, and there have been surveys that have shown in a lot of government departments like the MOD, where we have a lot of Black people who are nuclear scientists and stuff like that. These businesses, these government departments and businesses need to keep these people because they have deep specialism. So, but some other people are much better at, or in addition to their technical base, are very good at management and leadership. I think that if you are interested in getting into management, I think, first of all, you need to challenge yourself on the basis of what you've done in your technical role. What feedback have you had about your management style? What is the critical thing you've done to motivate people? Have you been able to demonstrate that you've been able to fast-track people's development, fast-track other people's progress? Because ultimately, management is about running a bigger raft of people. In my view, it's about making them successful. Invariably, when you create success for others, you create for yourself. So you need to really challenge yourself and see whether you've been doing that. If you have, and you have the other skills that go with that, running a balance sheet, at least understanding how to run a balance sheet, understanding your P&L, then of course, that is a good place to go to. In most businesses, they will have courses. And in most businesses, these courses are all online in big organizations. They're online tools that are available. You don't even need to ask anybody because it doesn't cost anything. The courses are there. And I would strongly suggest that you run through that a few times, run through the courses available a few times before you approach your management or your performance manager, whatever it is in your business. But of course, you do need to engage with your performance manager because they should give you honest feedback on what your prospects are. I'll tell you a quick story. Very many years ago, I thought about doing an MBA, and I engaged with KPMG and said, listen, I really want to do this because I think it's really helped me. And I was told, well, actually, you know what you're going to do your MBA for, you probably will get much more knowledge and experience by sticking with us and doing what you're doing, which is proved right. But also critically, in my instance, I also wanted to make sure I was progressing quickly. And the reality for me was doing an MBA in that instance was not going to fast track my career. So I didn't do it. So I think the short answer is make sure you understand what skills are required in your particular instance. Secondly, make sure you get clear, honest feedback from your performance manager as to whether they think there is an opportunity for you in the business, because there's no need to faff around if they're not going to give it to you. Thirdly, try and do some self-training yourself by going onto your systems online and looking at what tools are available.
Great, thank you. Ngozi also has got a question, so I'm just going to unmute you, Ngozi, so you can ask your question. All right. Yeah, Ngozi, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. It's Ngozi here. I've got a question. I'm in a unique position where I've worked within the financial services for several years. And over a year ago, I was in a situation where I applied for multiple roles. I got multiple offers, probably 5, 6 offers, and each one was rescinded because of the uncertainty of Brexit at the time. And some of the roles I was supposed to be starting were moved out of the country at the time. And then last year, the challenge I had was when I attended multiple interviews was that I was overqualified. And there was a concern of companies that I was going for roles where the pay was lower, and they were concerned that if something better came, I will move forward. And now there's a third challenge of COVID. So my question is, taking into consideration these 3 areas of challenges, so to speak, how would you advise that I effectively position myself in the marketplace?
Can I just ask, how many years had you worked in financial services, please?
Over 15 years in financial services.
And what sort of role was that?
Mainly within the change management space. I work for Deutsche Bank and Chicago Exchange, HSBC.
Sorry, I meant what type of role? What sort of
roles? Okay, so yes, mainly within the change management space. So it may have been a project management and program management and within the Scrum space, within the Agile space, but mainly within the change management space, but across, working for stakeholders across the company, right from asset management to finance and external third parties as well.
Do you agree that you were applying for jobs you were too qualified for? Because I think in the current, certainly 20, 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, I think people used to try and downplay their qualifications to get a job. But do you think that you were actually applying for jobs that you were overqualified for?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I knew the role, I could go in and I could just hit the ground running. And no, because I was working, I was applying to probably a completely different industry. So I had a completely different set of stakeholders and the challenges that those stakeholders bring. And it would have been challenging for me if I went for roles where, let's say, I had let's say 80% of the skills, though I go for roles like that. But I think it's half and half to the question that you've just asked.
I think that if I was recruiting and somebody was overqualified for the job and I wanted the person, I would, if it's in my remit, I would certainly be saying exactly that. Because there's no benefit to me having somebody join and 6 months later they move on. But one of the challenges that we often face and often see is sometimes we underplay our value, either because we're not confident about what we can bring to the party. And some of us are overconfident, but in your case, if you're being challenged around going for jobs that you are too senior for, I would take that feedback on board. In going into if you're going into a new area of expertise, I think that I would also be open and honest to say, listen, I am doing this because whilst I've got some excellent experience at change management, I haven't done this new area, and therefore you want to make sure that you can deliver at the right level. But you're hoping to go through very quickly, as in you're hoping to progress your career very quickly, despite this change of role, change of function. I think in the new world, things are going to get more competitive, unsurprisingly, because, you know, if we lose jobs, more of us will be competing for the jobs that are there. You need to take on board the feedback, at least I would say you need to take on board the feedback around going for jobs that you feel, around going for jobs that are under you. I think you need to go for jobs that are the right level for you. Otherwise, you will continue to have that as an issue.
Great, Richard. We only have time for one more question, and this is from Lola. She said, what options are there for someone who has had over 15 years experience at mid-management and executive levels in another country, but has recently relocated to England?
I think they're good opportunities, to be honest with you. I've seen loads of people who've relocated and have done very well, but I don't think we can expect to get, unless you're very, very lucky, I don't think you can expect to get exactly the same sort of job you did abroad in your first 3 months. It's quite hard to do that. But whether you get a job, of course you will. I think nowadays it's much easier because if you have the experience if you have good quality experience from working abroad, then there's no reason why that should not transfer over to the UK. But I would say a few things. One, very often if you're working in a particular professional requirement, you may need to qualify, you know, so in most of the professions, yes, you may have a specific qualification that was appropriate in a foreign jurisdiction. You may, to make yourself more valuable and to fast track your sort of integration into the UK, just make sure you do the cross qualification. I think it goes back to your point about also being direct. So we get lots of CVs where we have people saying, actually, you know what, I've worked here. I think this is what I can do. The work is exactly the same. You just need to be able to demonstrate the skill set. So you think the CV becomes really important. It's not the job title, because you can see that when Ngozi was speaking, I asked Ngozi, what exactly do you do? So the job title doesn't matter to me, because job title doesn't say much to me. It's what have you done? So I think that your CV really needs to be clear about specific bullets showing the person that's reading it, actually, you do have relevant experience. And indeed, many companies also look at people who have international experience. So I think it's selling that. I think that you shouldn't have a problem at all.